and welcome to the Irish History Pies. Today we're going to discuss Southern Loyalists and how they were treated by the Free State. Were they as discriminated as Catholics were in Northern Ireland? We're also going to discuss that the political and legal partition of Ireland was not necessarily followed by a social and cultural partition in Ireland. Calls for British government to provide further compensation to Southern Loyalists. Lord Selborne and others of the anti-Irish die-hard persuasion, including Lord Edward Carson, want a British Committee of Inquiry to make recommendations as to the compensation which ought to be paid to Irish Loyalists, who suffered in common with the rest of the people of the south and west of Ireland during the struggle which ended in the setting up of the Irish Free State. Lord Salisbury, a die-hard himself, before he became Lord Privy Seal in the Stanley Baldwin administration, could not see his way yesterday to agreeing to a formal committee, but he said an informal committee representing the Loyalists and the government would look into some typical cases of hardship. The government would see what could be done about finding a remedy.
Hello, you're listening to the Irish History Boys with me, Tim McGarry.
And me, Cormac Moore.
Cormac Moore, you read beautifully there, my friend, from
Thank you.
The Irish News in July 1925. The issue there is a bit strange. I didn't realise what was happening here. I was going, what's going on here? So basically, 1925, Free State has been in existence for...
3 years.
Three years.
Officially, yeah.
Officially. The Boundary Commission hasn't finally decided the boundary between Northern Ireland and the south of Ireland.
We're talking about the Boundary Commission again?
Shut up. Leave that Boundary Commission. Stop it. Stop. Let me finish a sentence without you saying Boundary Commission plugging your book. Your very good book. So 3 years in, and this is Edward Carson in the British Parliament and some other, presumed Tories saying...
diehards, as a lot of them are
the
called.
Irish government needs to compensate loyalists.
The British government.
The British government should be compensating.
There was an Irish Grants Committee which the British government contributed to paying loyalists, for damage that was done to them during the War of Independence and all of that kind of years of strife. The British government actually paid. The Irish government, the Free State government, gave some compensation to loyalists as well for damage done to them by the IRA or by.
The Irish government did that?
The Free State government did,
right.
yeah. When houses were burnt down or places attacked, right. The Irish government did give some compensation. But it was felt by 1925 they hadn't gone far enough. Right. That there still were many loyalists who had suffered much harm done to their property and their person,
right.
And they needed further compensation. The Free State government said, no, we've done enough now, we're not giving any more.
All right.
So the British government set up a second Irish Grants Committee, which convened from, I think, 1926 to 1928, 29, and there was about 4,000 applications, and well over more than half, well over 2,000 were given compensation by the British government, and they were all
so this is
Irish
for
Southern
loyalists.
Loyalists.
What about, did they not get a wee letter from Cork and Balbriggan going, you burnt us down during the War of Independence?
But yeah, that was separate treated, but this was specifically for Southern Loyalists.
So this is for Southern Loyalists,
and it was the terms were from the from the truce period in July 1921 up to the end of the Civil War in May 1923. So it's kind of a 2-year period that this Irish Second Grants Committee, which came out of this kind of call in 25 for further compensation. A new Irish Grants Committee, it was called a Second Irish Grants Committee, was set up that gave more compensation to Southern Loyalists. So it does bring into question how were Southern Protestants, because most of the Loyalists, some of the people who applied for compensation were Catholics, but the vast majority were Protestants. So how were Southern Protestants treated in the Irish Free State in its foundation years? So that has come up a lot. You see that a lot now today. Obviously a lot's been written about how Catholics are treated in the North and how their rights were removed and how they were discriminated against and how they were coerced. A lot of loyalists would say, and unions would say, well, what about the Protestants in the South?
Because their population declined rapidly, drastically.
I've heard basically of Protestant population declined from 1911 to 1926 in the Free State. Now, there's loads of causes for that. But there's been some good work done on that as well. But there was some discrimination against loyalists. There was some... basically, when the Free State was set up, it ultimately became a Catholic state.
Yeah.
So there Yes, they were still retained pretty much all of their religious freedoms, but they were living in a Catholic state,
And they were a smaller.
They were a lot more impotent politically than they would have been otherwise.
And they were a smaller minority than, say, Catholics in the north, all over the place.
There's only about 7% of the population by 926 was Protestant.
To be fair to the Southern government and to the Free State and to the people forming their constitution and stuff, they did make provision and made sure that the Protestants were represented, for instance, in the Senate.
Yeah, well, W.T. Cosgrave appointed many Protestants who would have been Southern Unionists to the Senate.
Yeah,
quite a good few. So like, and not only that, but they retained, like, if you professional jobs in banking and accountancy and engineering, like there were more Protestants in those professions than there were Catholics, even though they had 7% of the population. They still had retained a lot of the big land, a lot of farms. So they're definitely, the levels of discrimination against Protestants was minuscule compared to Catholics. But there were sectarian attacks. So there was very infamous killings in Dunmanway. This is April 1922, just before the Civil War started. 10 Protestants are killed.
It's in Cork, is it?
In Cork, Dunmanway, around Bantry, kind of West Cork, and they're killed. And it is a sectarian attack. Now it seems to be a local feud based on local reasons. But it's not sanctioned by the IRA, and it's completely condemned by the provisional government, Michael Connell's provisional government. But there are sectarian attacks. I've had 2 books out this year, believe it or not.
2 books?
And my first book was on Laois and the Irish Revolution.
Right.
And believe it or not, Laois, for county, didn't have much violence. It had, I think, the second most applications for compensation from Southern Loyalists. And it was
for Southern Loyalists.
So I think Laois at the time had like either the fourth or the third fort. Either the fourth or the third smallest population in the country. Yet there was more applications from Laois other than County Cork.
Are you implying that you're chancellors, or what's going on here? What do you
no,
mean?
but they were granted compensation in a lot of cases. There was
a
lot.
Were they being targeted? Were they?
There wasn't a lot of violence against Protestants, as
Right.
in people being killed, or there was shots fired on a couple of occasions. But it was more like cattle being driven off land, people being told get off this land, get out of this house.
Right.
They were forcefully evicted in some cases. They were boycotted.
Right.
There were Protestants, if they tried to sell their say cattle in a market, they were shunned, so they'd have to go miles and miles further afield to sell their livestock. Their hay was destroyed, or turf was destroyed. There was loads of incidents like that. They often had to billet, Protestants had to billet Republicans and people in their houses against their will.
Yes.
And they could stay there for months in the house, So there's loads.
Who's at the bottom of the garden? It's just a rod. Don't worry about it. Do they basically say we're here for?
Oh no, we're staying at his house,
Right.
whether you like it or
But
not.
they're not even in the bottom of the garden, all right?
Yeah, they're in the house.
Okay.
Yeah, so that happened a couple of occasions. There was people were attacked, violently attacked. But it was mainly to do with land and to do with there was a place called Lugacorn in Laois, and there was a plan of campaign back in the during the land wars where residents were evicted from Lord Lansdowne's estate, and the people who took places from them were Protestants,
Right.
planters as they were called locally at the time.
All right.
So this
Planters.
planters. This is in the 1890s, and but it was still going on up until 1910s, 1920s. It still wasn't resolved, and a lot of them were kicked out of their properties and land. So local issues were often the driver for the big political events at the time. So they would use the political events to kind of settle old scores and such. So that was happening in Laois. That's the county I've looked into, but this is happening all over Ireland. That loyalists were targeted as easy prey in some cases, and were either not able to sell their products, they were kicked off their land, their crops were destroyed, fences were torn down, livestock was killed. This was quite regular.
So it's interesting because the War of Independence, again, did a programme on this ages ago on the radio, said, was it a sectarian war? And, most of the people being killed by the IRA were either informers or there were RIC people or soldiers. But there was a sectarian undertone in certain areas, wasn't there? I
Yeah,
mean,
but
is that fair to say that
locally there
the
was
IRA were there many Protestants in the IRA? There were a few at the.
There's a couple, but not a huge amount. But it wasn't that the IRA was sectarian, and nor were Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin, I don't think, was sectarian, but as a party. But there were local issues.
But you unleash a certain lawlessness then.
See, this was happening, and particularly from the truce to Civil War. The truce. There was no police force. You had your RAC who weren't allowed to do anything. They were stuck in their barracks after the truce. You had Republican police who basically were dealing with the Dáil courts issues, and a lot of them were land based. Those decisions in the Dáil courts, but then you have the treaty sign, and you've got the IRA split, and when the British leave all the barracks and all of that. Who takes over the barracks? So there's a scramble to take over all the barracks, and it's sometimes anti-treaty, sometimes pro-treaty. So you had this kind of there was the Dáil government, the provisional government. Then there was obviously the anti-treaty Sinn Féin. So and the British were still there as well in much of Ireland at the time. So you had kind of these different governments, different security forces, no one really in power. It was in a state of flux. So people took advantage. Yeah, people took advantage of it. And as I said, I know from my research into Laois, my own county, they settled old scores, not related to the conflict per se, but often related to land. Yeah. And that's where the kind of you might say there's a sectarian element, but it was often over land, and sometimes it happened to be Protestants who had the best land. And they became the targets.
Well, happened to be. But this is an argument that the Unionists would use, that the Protestants were going to be mistreated down south, driven off their land and discriminated against. And
it's good ammunition.
They had an argument to say that.
And there was an orphanage in Galway, and I think there was maybe a couple of children were accused of spying, and all of the whole orphanage had to be shut down, and basically the children moved to Australia. So. This happened in Galway in around this time. The Protestant churches were destroyed as well. So there was some cases of overt sectarianism against Protestants at this time. But it wasn't sanctioned by the state. It wasn't agreed to by the state. The state went out of its way to tell Protestants and show Protestants that they were welcome to the Free State. And even though there was a massive decline of Protestants, in what became the 26 counties, the Free State, from 1911 to 1926, there are many reasons for that decline. It's not just because they're not going to get a fair kind of life and fair opportunities in the Free State. The British administration left in that time. The First World War happened at that time. There was loads of other reasons why Protestants left in huge numbers, and they were leaving in big numbers from 1900 onwards, when they saw the writing was on the wall in terms of home rule. A lot of them left for Britain, for Canada, elsewhere. So that kind of decline in Protestant population.
But also they didn't feel terribly welcome in this new Free State. A lot of them wouldn't feel very welcome.
I think some would, but most people accepted the Free State ultimately.
And fairly quickly too.
And fairly quickly. And they were able to live their own life.
Am I right? The Irish Times was the Protestant newspaper.
It was the Unionist newspaper. Unionist newspaper.
And basically, as soon as Free State came in and said, well, this is where we are now, we're not going to complain about it, we're not going to, this is,
and the churches, the Protestant churches all remained All Ireland bodies. And they were talking about they weren't able to hold synods or assemblies in some locations during the very tough revolutionary years, but they generally congregated in Dublin. They accepted where their lot was. Most people kept their own livelihoods in many respects, and they often just kept their own circles anyway. They went to school in Protestant schools. They obviously went to Protestant churches. They played Protestant sports. They hung around that circle, and that didn't change that much. And they retained their employment rights. They didn't have to speak the Irish language except when it was come to get civil service jobs. That was an issue, absolutely. There was a case of a librarian in Mayo County Council. She didn't get a job. Letitia Dunbar Harrison, I think her name was, and she didn't get a job because she was a Protestant. So there was
And in the 50s,
incidents like that. But they were almost the exception to prove the rule that there wasn't
Fetterdown
discrimination.
Sea, there was an incident.
That was in the
boycott,
50s, about.
But even up till fairly recently, Graham Norton talks about being a Protestant in the South. He's in Cork. Is he Bandon? He's from.
Yeah, Bandon.
Said, no overt discrimination, but a feeling of being slightly outside. And people knowing that it could be being a Protestant in Cork. That people go, he's one of them. It's not entirely and fully integrated into the.
It's not.
I mean, he doesn't. It's not in a. He comes back all the time and all that. He's proud to be Irish, but at the same time, there was a feeling of I'm slightly different here because I'm a Protestant.
Yeah, look, I don't know. I come from a Catholic background myself, but you wouldn't. Obviously, you go to different schools and rugby, for example. But rugby's a lot of the major Catholic schools. Rugby is their main sport. So it's you wouldn't find many Protestants playing GAA. In the South as well, they would. If you see
today.
Oh yeah, even today, absolutely. Even today, you wouldn't find many Protestants in any way involved in GA. But hockey, cricket would be the preserve of Protestants. Rugby is a little bit different. But you work with Protestants every day, and you wouldn't know, you wouldn't ask, you wouldn't care. It just never comes up, and you never, unless you said, "Oh, I'm going to a hockey game or a cricket game," which they wouldn't rarely do anyway. But but you wouldn't know that you were actually interacting with a Protestant most.
Yes.
You just wouldn't, because
it's
not an issue.
Protestants don't have a Protestant party down there as well. Like we have up here.
Exactly.
We're not divided on sectarian lines. None of the politics is anymore.
No, it's like there's not integration school in the South as well.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't come up in conversation. So maybe people do feel they're others or they're treated differently who are Protestant. I can't speak for that. But it definitely isn't overt, So, but there was discrimination, there was issues at the foundation state, but what's very important, I think, is a key difference here, is that the state itself went out of its way, I think, to make sure Protestants felt at home and were wanted, and kept their rights, and that was very different to the way Catholics treated in the North, fundamentally different. And that is the major difference.
I've heard the argument from a unionist perspective that is because the third of the population of Northern Ireland didn't want to be in Northern Ireland and were disloyal to the state of Northern Ireland by not wanting to be part of.
Where I'm from.
So that's why they were.
I get that.
I don't know, it's not justifying discrimination, I know, but I'm saying that's part of the reason for it to go well.
Well, it's a bit like chicken and egg, which comes first, why should I be loyal to a state that is going to destroy my rights? And then the state might go why should we look after that person who don't want to be in the state? They want to destroy the state. But loyalists, Southern loyalists didn't want to be part of the state either, and they accepted it, and obviously the Free State knew that they didn't want to be part of this state. I grew up in the South Leash in a place called Coolbanner, Emo, and there's a large church, the big Church of Ireland church. James Gandon, the famous architect, designed it. He also designed Emo Court near it. But there's a lot of Church of Ireland people who were neighbours that I grew up with. I remember we used to go trick-or-treating at Halloween, and you'd see that many of the houses would still have portraits of the Queen. This is in the late 80s, early 90s. So, so there still was a kind of ambiguous relationship with the Irish state by some Protestants.
And I think the difference is when the Irish Free State's established, it's there to stay. Even 100 years on from Northern Ireland, the existence of Northern Ireland is always in doubt, and it's always going to be, it's always in question. And, so there's always going to be instability there. Whereas the Irish Free State, you go, well, it's going nowhere.
Yeah, well, you have
even
to accept it.
From day two, day one, you go, well, this isn't going to change, is it? They're not going to go back into the British Empire.
That's a very good point, because obviously many Catholics thought this was a temporary thing, and even the Boundary Commission, going back to that again, if you're from a border area, you think this is going to be temporary anyway, because you're going to be transferred to the south. So why should I legitimise something I don't agree with? So there's all of these questions, but when it comes down to discrimination. There was discrimination, absolutely. There was some discrimination against Protestants. It was often more localised, often to do with issues to do with land, as opposed to sectarianism, which in some cases were related. But it was not sanctioned by the state.
Yeah, it wasn't government sanctioned like it
was not government sanctioned, and it was totally government sanctioned in the North.
Yeah,
absolutely. So.
The Irish History Boys is coming to Féile 25 for a live discussion and audience Q&A on Wednesday the 6th of August at St Mary's University, hosted by our friend Jim Fitzpatrick. Jim wrote this bit, by the way, our friend Jim Fitzpatrick. It's a chance to see us live and in the flesh. I mean, who doesn't want to see me and Cormac Moore in the flesh. What a treat. For details, visit our social pages and click the link below, and we will see you there, live at Fela, Wednesday the 6th of August. So we're in 1925, we have people in Parliament asking for compensation for unionists, for loyalists who were affected. But also there's a very interesting Irish news article here on our editorial about the cultural difference between North and South and tourism and things like that. And
are the links?
Yeah, and it's quite optimistic. It's kind of it's an odd sort of article. It's kind of suggesting that, you know, don't worry about it. Everything's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. You know, we've had an argument about whether or not, you know, partition happened politically. We're two very separate systems, but that we weren't as divided as other countries could have been. You think politically and culturally, to a certain extent, we're still united? Is that?
Yes, I did my PhD thesis on soccer split.
PhD, and I've all right.
But you said the A levels are so much superior to leaving cert.
Yes,
I presume the A levels are so much superior to PhDs as well. Like, you know, so.
Where did you get your PhD?
De Montfort and Leicester.
Okay, I never heard of it.
You never heard of De Montfort and Leicester?
No.
Okay, very good. My thesis looked at not just the soccer split. It looked at what happened to other sporting bodies, what happened to other kind of other organisations in Ireland when Ireland was partition. And I actually did a chapter on comparing the Irish soccer split to other splits, sporting splits around the world. So normally what happens is, say for example, if a country becomes united, as Germany did in 1990, or splits as the Soviet Union did, Yugoslavia did. All the cultural and sporting bodies, all the institutions, they follow the political move of uniting or splitting. Ireland was very different. Ireland, there was no obligation or compunction of Irish organisations to split once Ireland split. Yeah, which is very unusual. Yeah. You know, and so you look at most sporting bodies that were all Ireland bodies before partition. They still are today. Same with tourism. There was always cooperation because it was an all-island kind of tourism approach, to my respects, even though there was tourism bodies for the North and South. They cooperated with each other because they knew that they were selling the same package, really, in terms of same islands, similar landscape. We should cooperate with a small enough island. They actually were cooperation in motor permits as well. Accepting a motor license from the South could be used in the North. There was some cooperation there. All the religions, except for Judaism. Judaism is the only religion at the time that split. So, the Judaism in the North became part of the UK. But
the Presbyterian Church is the Presbyterian Church of Ireland. The Orange Order is the Grand Lodge of Ireland. GLOI. Exactly. It's not the Grand Lodge of Ulster or Northern Ireland. It's the Grand Lodge of Ireland.
Loads of trade unions, like the Irish Congress Trade Unions, was an All-Ireland body. Loads of All-Ireland body trade union movements. A lot of trade associations. Within accountancy, within pharmaceuticals. You name it. Like if they were in existence before 9/21, very few of them split. Yeah. Very few of them actually split. So that's what actually made soccer very interesting for me, because it split around the time of partition. There were a lot of different reasons for that, but that was actually unusual at the time. Normally, a lot of the links that remained stayed the case. So and that's very, very unusual in terms of other countries' experience of partitions or unity.
But there are cultural differences between North and South. I mean, and again, to go back to the previous discussion about discrimination against Protestants and discrimination up north, James Connolly famously said that partition would cause a carnival of reaction on both sides of the border, and eventually we get a Catholic state down south and an Orange state up north. I mean, you accept that? I mean, that's...
in the book on the Boundary Commission, I wrote about they were looking at what's going to happen when we transfer our territory. Yeah. So this is 4 years after partition happened. So and you could see that already in the vast changes. There was changes in how teachers were paid, in the pension system, in unemployment assistance. There was obviously a big difference in finances in terms of customs barriers. Yeah. Physical infrastructure of the North has changed. So much has changed within 4 years. So what thing has happened in 100 years. Yeah. So when we do talk about a border poll and we talk about how would you link up say security, for example, like what would happen if Ireland became united tomorrow and you'd have what's in the Irish Army 7,000 people, and then what happens to the PSNI? Like how would you provide security for a potentially hostile element that's going to come into your territory. So all those things have
Fellas
to.
from Cork will come up with a torch and 20 major and slap a few heads. That's all sorted out.
Well,
All sorted out.
but there's so much that's happened that we've diverged so much
Yeah.
since then. In many respects, that all of those things will come into play as such when that conversation does happen. But my point is that there still are a lot of links that have remained to this day, whether it's sport, whether it's religion, whether it's cultural bodies that are still all Ireland
Well,
bodies.
you see, I would argue the opposite. I would say, look, politically we're completely different. Ask anybody in Northern Ireland to name 2 cabinet members down south; they'd be hard pressed to tell you who the Taoiseach is. Your newspapers
that doesn't make you,
newspapers are completely separate. Your newspapers don't even cover Cliftonville's great victories, and they don't even care about it.
Can you imagine that?
The radio shows are different. Your TV shows are different. You know, culturally, you are extremely different from the north.
Well, there is that, but
and you don't even have the 12.
Yeah, well,
we
do have the 12 in Donegal and certain places. But I do think, culturally there are changes in terms of TV, but we still subsume the same types of TV.
Well, that's changing. TV's changing, obviously.
Yeah.
Everybody's streaming, or we're all on Netflix.
None of us are watching TV or news anymore.
Yes.
And does it really matter if, like, most people in the South don't know who the politicians are in the South either, for that matter. But yeah, look, of course there are cultural differences. There's 100 years of a complete separateness. But there still are links in terms of, as I said, sporting bodies, religions, trading organisations, cultural organisations that have remained all Ireland bodies. So those links have remained, which, as I said at the outset, is very unusual.
Yeah, well, this is a very unusual article, if you ask me, in the Irish News, July the 18th, basically, a bond of union, tourist development and Irish unity, and it basically says that tourism cooperation will eventually lead to Irish unity.
You can see why they would say that.
It's very gentle, softly, don't be worrying about partition, and you think from a nationalist perspective, the Irish News not going... we've been locked into this new state which we don't like, run by unionists. And
but I think the Irish News had accepted it, and people like Joe Devlin accepted. Look, it's here to stay. We have to reconcile ourselves with it, and how do we deal with it, get over it? Whatever you want to call it, is constantly boycotting institutions, ignoring them. Is that going to help our people? And Joe Devlin and people in the Irish News believed, no, listen, we have to reconcile ourselves to the Northern Irish state and work within its institutions, as opposed to completely ignoring and boycotting them forever.
Well,
that isn't going to help anyone.
Here's what the Irish News says in July the 18th, 1925. Time will doubtless smooth away the differences, lessen the sharpness of the divisions between North and South to a point where the opposing views may better lend themselves to mutual adjustment than is the case at present. So in 1925, they're basically saying, don't worry about it. Everybody calm down.
We're all going to get on a lot better with each other, cooperate a lot more.
If the editorial writer in 1925 was here in 2025, you think he'd go, oh, didn't expect this.
Yeah, I think I got that one wrong, didn't I? Look, but politically, they at the tripartite agreement of December 25, Craig said to Cosgrave, we should meet regularly, have informal meetings, formal meetings, to talk about issues of common concern that will affect both jurisdictions. And Cosgrove, absolutely, that's a great idea. Let's do that. They never met again.
Right.
And the first time.
Well, was that Craig's fault or Cosgrove?
Both
of them went, I'm very happy with my own little state. I'm in charge down here. And he's in charge
I do think Free State would have wanted. It was all Free State as well. They couldn't be seen as recognising the North, because that's recognising partition, which was basically a no-go political zone, because the Republicans were attacking them, even their own supporters were attacking them. So, it was very difficult political territory for them to involve themselves with the North in any way, because that showed legitimacy to a state that was not legitimised in most people's eyes. And the North, they want absolutely nothing to do with Dublin. The less to do with Dublin, the better. And this, even with there was a hydroelectric scheme in the Erne promoted in the 30s, and the Free State government wanted basically to get the water from the Erne to just clear up a lot of land in Fermanagh.
Right.
And Basil Brooke, he was becoming a big shot at that time. He wasn't yet Prime Minister from Fermanagh, so he was all for this, because he saw this as a great opportunity to free up land, to drain the land of the water, and benefit the Irish Free State, because they could use it for electricity, with the Shannon scheme and all that, and not Shannon, the hydroelectric scheme around it. And it took years for the Northern government to even though it was mutually beneficial for both jurisdictions, it took years for the Northern government to agree to the hydroelectric scheme because they didn't want anything to do with the South. Yeah. It was eventually Basil Brooke who, thinking of his own constituents in Fermanagh, goes, we need to do this. But the Free State were banging on that door for years trying to get the Northern government to do it. And even though it was going to benefit people from the North as well as the South, they refused to do it because the South was seen as totally politically toxic to have any involvement whatsoever with them. So it was probably more so in the North, that feeling of having nothing to do with the South politically than it was South to North. But it also was in the South as well. You were a partitionist if you spoke to the Northern government in many people's eyes.
All right, so if you even recognise it and say, well, that's...
Yeah.
It proved to be somewhat counterproductive, can I say?
It was
a fair assessment?
If you were a pragmatist, and unfortunately there weren't enough pragmatists.
So a Republican purist goes, if you recognise the six county statelet, then you give it legitimacy and you're collaborating with it.
Exactly.
Well, if you do nothing, it'll go away. Which is
this is the wishful thinking that was going around at the time, Yeah. If you close your eyes and do nothing,
wish,
it might
wish.
it might just go away. But that was government policy. It was like really strong on rhetoric for Irish government, like bombastic rhetoric. You have the evils of partition, and we need to get rid of this evil of partition. How are you going to do that? Well, we can't do coercion. We don't have a big enough army to do it, and obviously it's part of Britain, so that ain't an option. We won't talk to them, unionists, because then we're partitionists and we're recognising an institution we don't have anything to do with. So they do nothing except talk to each other about how evil partition is for decades until Lamass comes in and Lamass actually, I think this is not going to work. We need to be more pragmatic here. Let's start talking to unionists and maybe we can have some reconciliation, some cooperation. And then the Free State governments were against the Council of Ireland originally, which was set up under the Government of Ireland Act, retained under the treaty, which was meant to have met between cabinets of 20 people from the Dáil and 20 people from Stormont were meant to meet and discuss issues of common concern, like relating to fisheries, railways, and seals of animals. Now, that was abolished with the tripartite agreement as well. Now, having ever meeting, unions didn't want it, and neither did the Free State government want it. Wow. So it was only the 60s.
Councils of Ireland don't seem to work, do they? They had tried one in 1974, and that helped bring down the
that was a big reason for Sunningdale.
A big reason for Sunningdale. And even under the Good Friday Agreement 1998, the cross-border bodies, they're kind of weak and wishy-washy.
But there are some... there
are a couple of practical things, but there
are 6 or 7 that are actually bodies created now, and they're obviously the North-South Council ministerial meetings. They don't seem to... and the DUP obviously... before they actually collapsed Stormont last time round,
boycotted.
They boycotted the North-South ministerial meetings. But I think the bodies, the Waterways Ireland, the Intertrade, they are doing some good practical work that heights. They're not flashy. They don't get into the headlines, but they are actually doing good work on a cross-border basis. But Irish government policy only changed towards practical measures of how partition's here to stay for the foreseeable future. How do we deal with it? How do we overcome it if we can? And that's when they actively promoted
and now you're giving us
bodies.
money. You're giving us money. You're going to build a bridge over that Warren Point and all of that footbridge. You're going to build the A5.
The Shared Island Initiative.
You're going to help us build Casement Park.
Whenever that happens.
That happens. Never mind the United Ireland in my lifetime. Well, I see Casement Park.
You'll see United Ireland before you see Casement Park, maybe.
You're loaded now, so you're giving us money.
Yeah, but being loaded, that I find it's very cyclical as well.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, we better get it off them now, quick. Give us the money now
before it's all gone. We've been there in our lifetime as well when that happened. Do you remember the Celtic Tiger?
I do remember the Celtic.
The Celtic Kitten very soon.
No, everything's going to be okay.
So
no, I found that very interesting. That the mood and the tone of the Irish news of that at 25. That it wasn't as virulent and violent, or kind of, and maybe I think there's also a war weariness as well. It's said, and everybody just went. We've had the War of Independence. We've had awful troubles. We've had the Civil War and all of that. Everybody just calm down and let things settle down.
There is a bit of a wishful thinking in this as well. Like the signs weren't there that that eventually things will all settle down and everyone just start singing together and
Yeah.
one happy family. There is this wishful thinking as well there.
Yeah.
But again, it's the absence of practical policies, strategies to overcome partition. That's what's missing all this time as well. And often it's too difficult politically to go there.
Yeah.
Because you're like Thomas Johnson, he was the leader of the Labour Party. He was always saying, look, the Council of Ireland is the best avenue we have of having any chance of unity. At least let's talk to unionists. Let's actually discuss areas of common interest. Being in the same room, that might help. Might help towards reconciliation. And he was laughed at. Like I think Kevin Regan said. All the Council of Ireland do is look at sheep dipping and thistle cutting. It's an irrelevant institutional body. We want nothing to do with it. So it was just too difficult politically for Free State to go there, and it was absolute no go for any unionist workers all to have anything to do with the South. Because we must remember, I've said it quite a few times in the past, that the Ulster Unionist hatred for Dublin was far stronger than their love for the British Empire. Their love for the British Empire was conditional, but their hatred for Dublin was absolute. And Irish nationalists never understood that.
Yeah.
They never understood that.
No, I think you're right. Yeah. They never understood that. You're listening to the Irish History Boys podcast. You can get in touch with us anytime at WhatsApp or email. If you have any questions, ask us questions. Cormac has, what did you have, PhD you have? Or
PhD. That's how many A-level staff
He's a PhD, so you ask him any question you want. That man will answer.
You do know PhD is a specialist topic on one subject.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
whereas an A-level,
when you're
an
doing,
A-level, I covered
there you said it.
1798.
And the 1848 Young Ireland movement.
1848, we haven't covered the Young Irelanders yet. WhatsApp message, send us a WhatsApp message or voice note 07483 313 842. Drop us an email on irishhistoryboys@gmail.com. I think we'll end it there. We'll have Cormac, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I feel enlightened. I don't know if we've come any closer to uniting Ireland.
I think we have.
You think so?
I think it's around the corner.
Is it in my lifetime?
Well, it depends on your lifetime.
Well, what age you think I am?
41.
Yeah, we'll definitely end it there. Thank you very much for listening to the Irish History Boys. See you next time.
See you next time.